Welcome to Mere Mortal Dev. Today we're going to do it and we're going to stick OpenClaw on a Raspberry Pi. We know this is possible. We can probably see other people do it out there on the internet, and I myself have done it as well. I have a Raspberry Pi 5 running OpenClaw right now, sitting on my desk, and I've been using this all week. I just leave the Raspberry Pi running here, and then from my iPhone over Telegram, I can talk to the Raspberry Pi. I can ask it questions, I can do all the things a chatbot would do, and I can also ask it to improve itself in different ways. So while I was out this week, it installed its own skill to be able to go out and search the web. So I could ask it questions about my website. So all this kind of stuff is super duper fun. Raspberry Pi 5 is a pretty powerful machine for what it is. So I want to see if we can put it on an even more resource constrained Raspberry Pi. So I just unboxed this Raspberry Pi 4B yesterday, and I want to see if we can put OpenClaw on that and have it run with reasonable performance as well. So this Raspberry Pi 4B has 2 gigabytes of RAM, and that's going to be one of our primary constraints. Again, I haven't even done this yet, so we're going to find out if it works together. Now, on the other side, I have, again, this Raspberry Pi 5 that I just showed you. And let's say, for example, I don't remember how much RAM I have on that machine. But, to do the before and after comparison, we should probably know that. So there are plenty of ways to find out how much RAM you have on a machine. And so if you want to do it the Unixy way, this is going to seem slightly nuts, but instead of doing it that way, let's do it the future sci-fi way and just ask the bot. So I'm going to SSH in to my Pi 5 sitting here on my desk. So now I'm in the terminal on that Pi 5 that I just showed you. And then I'm going to spin up a chat with OpenClaw. So I'm going to do OpenClaw 2A. So that's a text user interface. And then I can pass in, if I want a new session, if I want a new session, I can just pass in this flag, and then we'll just we'll give it a date stamp. So we'll say MMD for Mere Mortal Dev, and then we'll do so today is February 28th. So we should be able just to spin up a new session like that. And you can see now I'm in my chatbot. There are other ways to interact with this, even on if you're just talking directly to the Pi, but for our purposes here, this is how we're going to do it. And then I'm just going to ask it, how much RAM do you have? Hey, Navi, how much RAM is on the machine that you're currently running on? So we're going to let that run for just a bit. And again, there are commands that we could have been doing instead that are tried and true to do that. But I just want to show that the bot itself can learn about the machine it's running on. And you can see right there that it's got 4 gigabytes of RAM. So for a Pi 5, that's actually pretty under spec already. I think today, you can get up to 16 gigabytes on a Pi 5. But either way, we're going to take the Pi 5, which has 4 gigabytes of RAM and probably greater processing speed, and then compare it to what it's going to be like to run that same sort of thing on a Pi 4B. So the first thing we need to do to get started is we'll need to put the OS on an SD card. So we're going to do kind of the all the way from the beginning with this Pi setup. So the first thing is I've got this little SD card here. It's just what I happened to have sitting around. This one has 64 gigabytes on it, which is way more than we're going to need for this project, and potentially more than you would need for any OpenClaw situation that you're doing. But it's what I happen to have lying around, so that's what we're going to use. So I just plugged the SD card into this little dongle that will let me plug in over my via USB-C to my Mac. So I'm going to plug that in here. And then the first thing we would need to do for any Raspberry Pi, and this has got nothing to do with OpenClaw yet, this is just what you would be doing anytime you set up a new Pi, is you're going to open up the Raspberry Pi imager application. This is one of the easiest ways to get up and running. So you'll have this imager application that you download, and then you select your device. So we talked about this before, but we're going to put this on a Raspberry Pi 4 Model B. So I select that. And then I'm going to pick the OS. Lots of different OSs and use cases that you could pick from, but we're going to go with the default 64-bit. Then we will pick that SD card that we just looked at. We're going to have it called Mere Mortal Pi. Do the basic customization. I'm in Japan, so this is all good. Then we're going to do username and password. So I'm going to give myself a very simple password so we can remember how to log in while doing this video. Then from here, we're going to log into our network. And then next, we will use a SSH key to access the Pi. So I already have mine set up, so I'm just going to leave it as is and hit next. And then I'll go ahead and enable Raspberry Pi Connect just for good measure. And then at the end, you'll see that we have a summary of everything that we've chosen. It's the Raspberry Pi 4 with 64-bit OS on this SD card and all of these configurations. So we'll go ahead and hit write, and then I'm going to erase everything on that disk and just let it write. So we'll come back in just a bit, and we'll have a look at what we have at the end of this write. All right, we're back. So the write is finished, and you can see here in the Raspberry Pi Imager app that, again, we selected the Pi 4, 64-bit OS on this SD card with all these configurations, and we're good to go. So we'll click Finish, and that's going to go ahead and inject that for me. I can pull out this dongle from my Mac, and so we'll pull out the SD card here. And then the next thing we need to do is just stick the SD card into the Raspberry Pi like this. So the SD card reader is here on the back of the Pi. So we'll just slide that in there. The next thing we're going to do is just simply to plug in the Pi. So I have a USB-C cable here, and we'll go ahead and power it up. You can see it starting to boot. Now, if we were successful, we should be able to go in and actually just SSH into that Raspberry Pi. So that's what we're going to give a try now. So the first thing we'll want to do is come over to the terminal, and we're going to SSH into the Pi that we just set up. So I'll type in my username and then and then the name of the Pi that we set up in the Pi Imager application. So in our case, that was Mere Mortal Pi, and then I'll do .local. And the Mac will likely ask you if you want to trust it when you first run it, and you'll just go ahead and type in yes, since it was you who just set that up, if you're logging in over SSH. Otherwise, if you're doing password authentication, you would pass in your password instead. And from here, now we're just inside of the Raspberry Pi. And so we can just kind of like look at the internals, and it's just what you would assume is on a Raspberry Pi when you first log in. So we've now successfully set up an SSH session with the Raspberry Pi. And from here, we're going to actually start looking at putting OpenClaw on this Pi, which is what we came here to do. So I'll pull up the getting started documentation for OpenClaw. And of course, this is the getting started documentation for February 28th, 2026. Tomorrow on March 1st, it might be different. The stuff is changing all of the time, so always reference the latest documentation for OpenClaw. But let's just let's see what it's like running this today. So if we kind of scroll all the way down here, we can kind of have a look and see we need node 22. We're actually not going to worry about that because the installer is going to handle that part for us if we don't have Node installed, and we can probably verify. I don't think it'll come installed. That's right, on the Pi. by default, and that's okay. The installer for OpenClaw is going to handle that. We need to have Mac OS, Linux, or Windows. We're running it on Linux here, of course. And we're not going to build from source, so we don't have to worry about PNPM. And we'll skip some of this other stuff. We're just going to come straight down to the installer script, and which is what they're currently recommending that we do. We'll copy this script, paste it into the Pi's terminal. And if you have a look over here, what you're going to see just above here in the terminal is that it hasn't found Node.js, so it's going to install it. And it'll also put in the necessary Linux build tools. So depending on your connection and the device you're running it on, this could take a little bit. So we'll just kind of sit here and watch it pass by and come back when it's ready for next steps. All right, and now it has gone through all of that to get us set up. A lot of time has passed. On a faster machine and a better connection with a better Wi-Fi chip, you may find it moves faster than that, but on the Pi 4 Model B, it took a minute. So anyways, now we get to answer some questions. First of all, it says, I understand this is personal by default and shared multi-user use requires lockdown, continue. Yes, yeah, we're only going to use it for us. And then onboarding mode, we're going to go with quick start, and we can get into the details later if we need to. But for now, we're going to go with model provider, and I tend to use OpenAI, but there are a lot of other options here that you could pick from. So let's see, we're going to do OpenAI. By the way, they do support OAuth, and that's typically what I use on my Pi. So like if you already have an OpenAI account, you will not get booted from the platform for using your account with OpenClaw, at least not as of today. Whereas with Google and Anthropic, I've been hearing stories and seeing stories on Hacker News of people like getting their accounts revoked. So anyways, be careful with that stuff if you're trying to use OAuth. But currently OpenAI does support it, and that's what I'm using for my actual OpenClaw instance. In this case, just for convenience, I'm going to use an OpenAI API key. That way, if anything leaks in the video, I could just go back and delete it pretty easily. So we'll do key, and I'm going to paste the key now. And it's interesting that it says the current is OpenAI 5.1 codecs. I don't think that's what I want to use, though. So let's see. What are my other options here? Let's scroll all the way down. You can see there's a lot of stuff to look at. Even though we're just going to talk to it generally, we may throw some coding questions at it at some point. I'll go ahead and default to 5.3 codecs, and partially because this context window is massive, and that might be nice. 5.2 Pro. Oh, it has the same context window. Interesting. I don't know. We're here as developers, so we're going to go with codecs just in case. That's my level of comfort with that. So now we can do some stuff where we would set up a way to talk to it, like through Telegram, WhatsApp, Discord, or the like. I think we will not set up a channel right now, just because each one of these is going to be highly specific. So far, I've tried WhatsApp and have failed. I don't understand how to get that working, but I'm also not much of a WhatsApp user anyways. I have also tried iMessage at some point in the past. Now, this would have been like 3 weeks ago, which in OpenClaw history is ancient history. But when I tried it last time, it just completely didn't work. So I don't know, your mileage may vary on that. This would be my ideal if I could get it to work, though. I am currently using Telegram on my own instance, and that's working just fine. I've been pretty happy with it, actually. But it is like, it's basically turns Telegram into my OpenClaw bot because it's the only thing I use it for. Yeah, I don't know. There's another thing called Blue Bubbles. So if you're in the Mac world, apparently you can use Line. I live in Japan, so like Line is like the default messaging app for all of humanity here. So anyways, I'm not trying to put more line into my life, so I don't want to do that. But anyways, we're just going to skip it for now, and we can add channels later if we decide to. So we'll let it do some setup here. And it also asks if we want to add some skills. So skills in OpenClaw are a pretty interesting idea. And let's see if we can find a good page for it. Here we are. Skills. So basically, the idea here is that you can add these skill folders that teach the agent how to use tools, and they're kind of like plug and play in an interesting way. There's like even like marketplaces out there where you can go and like select different skills and get like a light touch on maybe some vulnerabilities and stuff like that. So, anyways, we can configure some skills. I'm gonna say yes, just so we can have a look at what's under the hood here. But you could set it up to work with like one password, Blog Watcher, which is like an RSS thing, and so on. There's GitHub. I'm trying to think of one that'll be fairly simple if we do decide to set it up. Sure, we'll go with summarize. I know that I've added this, but I don't recall what the setup is like. So we'll go ahead and hit enter there. And it'll ask if we want to show the Homebrew install command, because we are going to need to install Homebrew as well. So we'll say, yes, please show me that, because then I need to go in and actually install that on my Raspberry Pi, which we'll do in just a second. Yeah, Brew is not installed. Right. So we'll need to actually install Homebrew first. It's interesting, that's the one thing that it doesn't set up for you, which is fine. It's not a hard setup to do, but it is something that we need to go do. So I think I'll go ahead and take a detour real quick and set that up. So in another terminal tab, once again, we're going to SSH into the Pi, and then we'll take that install command that sort of got butchered and fix it up. And so just in case if you're wondering what this is, we can go into the Homebrew website, and the wiser move here would most likely be just get it from the source as opposed to trusting a bot to tell you what to install. So why don't we just do that instead? We'll just copy in that install command there, and we're going to paste it in and let that install, and then pass in this sudo password and let it know that we're okay letting Homebrew install. So this is another thing that we'll just get to wait for a little while. And now Homebrew is installed. So we'll go ahead and just exit out of this SSH session. And then I'm going to come back over here and we'll kind of try to move forward with everything else that we need to install for OpenClaw. So I don't want to set up a bunch of API keys right now. You can set one up for Google Places. You can set one up for Gemini, even Notion. I don't even totally understand why that one's like a default question, but it seems to be. An OpenAI key, which we already set up. And then we're just going to say no to everything for a moment. And then we can enable all this other stuff here, but I don't think we will for the moment. Actually, let's install bootmd. I lied. We're going to go ahead and install all of those things. Those are all things that we could potentially play with later. Probably not in the course of this video, but we will at some point. As you slowly dial in what your OpenClaw instance is going to be, you'll find that you're kind of like polishing it over time. So anyways, now we're going to get some other output from the terminal here. I'm going to scroll back up while it's working and just see, you can see it's, let's see, installing The gateway service, which failed most likely due to this shell instance not having Homebrew available to it when we started running the command. So let me see here. It says we can use the dashboard link above, but the first thing I want to do is actually just make sure that we're good. So the install went as planned. And we don't even have OpenClaw available to us yet. So we probably need to source our bash file. Let's try again. Okay, and that'll work. So since so many changes are being made during the install process, it's likely you are going to need to source your bash RC file or your ZSH RC file or whatever config files you have for the shell, or you could simply just like exit out of that the SSH connection and then come back into it, and you would be fine as well. But either way, let's see. So it came back with a few issues. I suspect some of them could be due to the fact that Homebrew wasn't installed when we ran. Okay, so the fact that this is not a Git checkout, we can ignore. That was intentional. We installed via the script, not through a Git clone. State integrity, the OAuth directory is not present. That's fine. We didn't set up any OAuth. No security warnings were detected, which is great. Skill status 4 eligible with 47 missing requirements. So let's see if we can run this OpenClaw Doctor fix and have it handle any of those missing requirements. Another thing we get to wait for a moment. Okay, so now we're going to head over to the terminal again, and we'll have a look at OpenClaw and see if it runs. So we're going to type in 2E for text user interface, and we're going to hit enter, and this should give us a chance to talk to our bot for the first time. So let's try it and see what happens. Cool. So when you run it, you're always going to get some sort of like pithy little comment from OpenClaw, and then it'll show you where it's running and just the status of your agent. So let's just try to say hi and see what we get back. One thing I'm noticing is that on the Pi 4, the 4B, it's feeling pretty slow, and I'm not sure if that's Wi-Fi or if it's just the processing power of the Pi or both. But it's definitely feeling slower than it would on the Pi 5 so far. But anyways, let's have a look and see what it said. I'll scroll back up here, and it says, "Hey, I just powered on here, and I realized I don't even know what to call myself or you yet. Mind helping me sort out the basics?" So it's asking what its name should be, what kind of creature or persona do you want me to embody, what vibe fits, and signature emoji. Okay, so that's pretty standard. Like you're always going to get some kind of prompt like that. It's going to ask who you are and who it is and some other basics. So let's see. Let's go with, for one, we'll say that its name is, we're going to call it Sprite. And let's see. If you need a new line in the terminal, it's going to, on a Mac, or at least on my Mac, on a Japanese keyboard, it's Control J. So next up is 2, what kind of creature or persona do you want me to embody? I don't even know how to answer that question, to be honest. But let's say you are helpful companion. Sky's the limit on that, I suppose. I'm not as creative, I suppose, in that area because a lot of times I'm just trying to get these things to help me build coding projects, and so I don't need like a ton of personality out of them. As a matter of fact, I usually try to chip away at that, but I'm sure there's actually some fun things you could do with it. What vibe fits? I don't know. Let's just go with snarky and see what it comes back with. Here's snarky, helpful companion. And I don't know if those things are at odds with each other. Let's find out. Uh, signature emoji. Let's just pull up the emoji picker here and see what we can get. We'll go with the lightning bolt. And then we'll go a little bit further down here and see. So it said, what's your name? So I'm Ash. Anything I should know right away? Preferences, projects, boundaries. I'm going to skip that for now because I don't want to dial it in too much yet. But let's go ahead and hit enter and see what it says. So it says, got it, I'm Sprite, your helpful and snarky companion, and your Ash. I've saved that in our files, so it sticks. Next up, want to walk me through anything I should know, projects, boundaries, or how you want me to show up? We can dive right into whatever's on your plate. So, okay, so from there, like, kind of the sky's the limit, right, on what it can do. So I'm trying to think of just like something simple we could ask it. How about this? Get back over into the terminal here. Tell me about the weather today here in Kyoto. Now, what I would expect it to do is, potentially there's a few options. It could go into, say, like a search engine and look that up on a web page, although we haven't configured it to look at, to be able to do web search yet. That's actually sometimes a thing you have to ask it to set up. But it also might just go hit up some public API. Dark Sky used to be the go-to for weather APIs in the past, but they no longer exist as a entity that developers can interact with, at least at scale and in casual ways. There are some other options out there, and I'm going to totally blank on the name, but maybe this thing will figure it out. It's certainly doing some work, but like I said, on the Pi 4, I'm noticing that it does take more time to get the job done than it has on the Pi 5. So while it works, maybe for real time, this might not be the ideal setup. Weather rundown for today. So today is indeed Saturday, February 28th, around 9:30 local. Right now, it's partly cloudy, 11.6 degrees Celsius, which matches what I'm seeing on my iPhone, and dry air. Yep, and the high is going to top out at 12, it says, which is exactly what my iPhone says too. So, anyways, great, it can do the weather, but the point is you can kind of ask it to do whatever you want and expect it to work out. So let's try. Earlier, we talked to my Raspberry Pi 5, like the OpenClaw instance there, and got it to tell us about the system it was running on. So let's ask it something about the Raspberry Pi it's running on. So you're currently running on a system that I'm SSH'd into. I'm curious what you can tell me about that system. Talk to me about what kind of system it is and what its specs are. My transcription's a little slower today as well because I've been configuring it, and I think I configured myself into higher quality, but at a slower pace. So I'm still dialing that in. If you're curious, I'm using an app called Mac Whisper for transcription, and I use it constantly. It's just like a more fun way for me to interact with my Mac in general. And so what I'm trying to do is figure out how to get it to be higher quality, but the quality will come at the expense of some latency, as you can see today. So to be continued. But anyways, here we go. So from what I can see inside the box, it's hardware. It's a Raspberry Pi 4 Model B Rev 1.5. It's got 4 cores. Um, it's running the OS that we just installed, so a flavor of Debian. It doesn't say that it's running Raspberry Pi OS, which is fine, but that's actually what it is, or how it's marketed. So it has 2 gigabytes of RAM, roughly, and with 1 gigabyte in use. Okay, so that's cool. Storage, 58. So it's funny, we're like starved for RAM, but have more storage than we probably would ever possibly use for something like this. Um, Other bits, CPU feature flag. Yep, okay. That's actually super helpful information here, talking about so this Spectre thing is like a vulnerability. And probably if we're going to do something important with this, we'd want to address that. But for what we're doing here, where it's tucked away into my local network, I'm not worried about it. And then it offers some other things that it could do. So that's pretty cool. I think the last demo that I just wanted to show, and again, these are all um, not entirely practical. Like they're not things that you're going to be doing all the time. Like if you want a weather app, like setting up OpenClaw on a Raspberry Pi for that is um, just incredible overkill. But I respect it. But either way, that's probably not what you're going to be doing with it all the time. Nor will you be asking it about the machine. But one thing you can do is ask it to interact with things on the web, for example. And so I just want to show you, and I'll see if I can recreate the flow that I had the other night about asking it to go out and find some information on my wife's website. So I'll do that right now. So my wife Ryoko, she has a business called Hanayu where she teaches Ikebana lessons here in Kyoto. I want you to go out and see if you can find her website for me. Nice. See, the transcription spelled Hanayu correct, which is what we want. That's one of the things I'm trying to work on on the transcription side right now. But anyways, okay. So I was expecting this to fail because it's going to ask me for a Brave Search API key, and the Brave Search API key. For all I know, that's a fantastic service, but they want a credit card for this use case, and it's not something that I just don't want to enter my credit card into a million services that I'm going to forget about later. So I'm going to ask it if it can get smart about finding other ways to do this. So let's not stick to the Brave API key or the Brave API as the way to do this. Surely you can go out and use a search engine or something like that. Is there a skill that we need to add to you or something else that you would recommend so that we can enable you to get out there and search the web like a normal person? Remember that you would have access to things like Chromium and potentially other browsers if we need to install those. The idea here is that we're just kind of walking through a basic helping OpenClaw improve itself. And the other day I was able to get this to work from the Pi 5 from my phone when I'm sitting across town in Kyoto, talking to the Raspberry Pi 5 sitting on my desk via Telegram, and it went out and tried to find this website, gave me that exact same problem about the API key, and then I pushed back on it, and it went out and figured out how to do it through other means and came back with an answer. So we'll see if in a reasonable amount of time we can get it to do it on the Pi 4. While we're waiting, one thing I think we did not install when we installed Skills was Claw Hub. So Claw Hub is the public skill registry for OpenClaw. It's a free service. All skills are public, open, and visible for everyone. A skill is just a folder with a skill.md file plus any supporting text files, and you can browse and all of that kind of stuff. So let's have a look at that while we're waiting. Now, this is a skill that you would normally install first. So I'm not sure if, while we're in chat mode, if we're going to be able to install it. I haven't tried this workflow before, but previously when I installed OpenClaw, I went ahead and added Claw Hub as a skill from the beginning. And then what you can do is basically come in and just have a look at different skills. So it's interesting to me. This is definitely a moment in time, but there are no highlighted skills or popular skills on Claw Hub today. I'm sure that's going to change. But anyways, I came in here before, and I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, was it Mac Porter? Maybe it was something like this that I think was like an MCP situation. Yeah, okay, so Claw Hub is struggling today, which is fine. This is like a new thing, so I won't be able to show this to you right now. But previously, when I looked at it, you could pull up some of the suggestions that OpenClaw makes for skills when you first install it, and it will, if you look them up, uh, which is wise to do, right? Like not just like you don't want to randomly install npm dependencies. You probably don't want to randomly install skills that you haven't at least looked at yet. So for this skill, I think it was this one. I'm unable to click it right now either. So I think their website is struggling a bit. But either way, like this website, here we go. So it aims to give you some kind of indication of like whether or not the skill is trustworthy or not. So even the official installer would recommend this skill. But when I went to look it up, it says that it's suspicious. What does suspicious mean? Well, I don't know. We dig into it and find out. It tries to offer some explanations, which I assume are AI generated themselves. But this is something to dive deeper into, at least for me right now, because I'm so new to OpenClaw. I've decided to skip something like this. Perhaps it's fine. But out of an abundance of caution, while I'm still a newbie, I decided to wait on this particular install. So anyways, cool. So it's interesting that, so it didn't even tell me what it did, right? It just went out and found the website after all. So I'm going to ask it how it did that in a minute. But for now, let's just see if its information is correct. So it says, found it. Ryoko runs everything out of hanayu.studio. The site is live, current, and full of detail. Here's the quick download. So Kyoto studio experience, what to expect, staying in the loop. Yep, she does this newsletter as well. And this is all information straight from the website, which is really cool. Shout if you want the booking flow availability checks or write-up of the TripAdvisor reviews next. So that's super cool, right? Like it told me it couldn't do something. I pushed back a little bit and then it went out and figured it out. So let's find out how it did that. And that may be like the last thing that we talk about here today. Hey, that's really cool. By the way, just a moment ago, you told me that without that API key, you wouldn't be able to do exactly what you just did. So I'm curious, what was your workaround for this? Again, one can imagine that it found an alternative API that doesn't require a key, or it stood up a headless browser of some kind and did it that way. If I remember correctly, Raspberry Pi OS comes pre-installed with Chromium, so it could have done that. Let's find out. So it says, right, you saw me hit a wall with the Brave Search API because there's no key configured. My workaround was to skip the API entirely and retrieve pages directly. So command line, grab and search HTML from engines that don't require keys like Bing or DuckDuckGo. That lets me inspect page source with even if I can't run the official API. And then web fetch on specific URLs. So, okay, it sounds like what it did is it made a curl request out to a search engine, and then it did web fetch once it actually had a URL, and it fetched my wife's web page for Hanayu. So instead of an API-driven query, It was basically fetch the page yourself, parse the bits you need, which is slower, but still works when the official search engine search endpoint is locked. That's cool. In this case, which search engine did you end up using? I found that response was interesting, right? It was kind of vague and like what it did to it kind of spoke in generalities about the shape of its approach, but without actually saying specifically, here's the thing I did. It says I pulled the info from Brave's public search page, rendered in the browser, and then followed direct links from there. Okay, cool. So in other words, we had to ask it to do a little bit of thinking around the problem. So instead of going straight to the API key, it pulled up a search like a browser and search engine. No, sorry, didn't pull up a browser, did it? It made a curl request. That's really cool. Can you remember to do this next time I ask you to look up something on the web? I don't want the API key to be a blocker. Maybe this is the last thing I'll show you, which is just that it can start to remember things because it will write to files locally, like markdown files locally, and remember this kind of stuff. So we'll give it just a second. Got it. Next time you need web research, I'll go straight to the direct page, fetching or other manual workarounds so the missing API key doesn't slow us down. Okay, so that's pretty much it. What we did was, in the course of some time, take this brand new Raspberry Pi 4B and, first just flashed the OS onto the SD card here and SD card over here, and then set it up, SSH'd into it and installed OpenClaw and got it running. So hopefully that's like a nice sort of whirlwind tour. And if nothing else, hopefully will put your mind at ease a bit that this stuff is possible without insane hardware, right? Now, if you want to run local models, of course, you're going to need better hardware than a Raspberry Pi 4B. But the reality is most of us are going to end up calling cloud models anyway. So in this case, you can see here, I ended up configuring it to talk to OpenAI GPT 5.1 codecs. But you could pick from any of the other models that we saw in that long list earlier. But one thing I won't be able to do, because RAM is so constrained, is load a model locally. So those kind of trade-offs are what you want to consider when you're thinking about your hardware of choice. But I would say if you're curious about OpenClaw and you have like old machines lying around that you could play with, don't let that stop you. Like those are actually most likely going to work pretty well. And again, like I'm not sure what the slowness is with the Raspberry Pi 4B. Again, I might suspect things like the Wi-Fi chip or maybe the processing power. I don't really know off the top of my head, but it's something I could look into. But for the Raspberry Pi 5, I can tell you it's pretty nice actually. So I'm pretty happy with that as a machine. And like I said, I've kept it running straight for, at this point, probably 5 or 6 days and no issues. It's always there when I need it. So anyways, I hope this just gives you a nice sort of idea of a whirlwind setup on fairly low powered machines of how to get OpenClaw up and running. If you end up doing this and you come up with some fun ideas of what to do with it, absolutely let me know in the comments. Like I'm still exploring it myself. I don't have any practical use cases if I'm totally honest, but it is just kind of nice to have a bot to kind of fidget with and slowly learn how to help it improve itself over time. And I'm sure we'll come up with some interesting things to do. But I'd love to hear what you're doing as well. All right, thanks for following along with Mere Mortal Dev this time. Look forward to catching you next time around.